we were doing drills, we were getting ready, infrastructure was developed. Then 2016, you had the Zika virus. Again, everyone's aware, bulletins out, especially if you're an expecting mom because of microcephaly. And then something that actually has teeth, the COVID-19 hits, and it's like we've forgotten everything that we were able to do before, and we took no lessons from the past and put them forward into the future. So what I've learned is I'm fairly disappointed by all factors of government and their response. And I think that we can do better. As far as state prep, I think we should do more with strategic stockpiling and rotating inventory, especially with things like PPE. We can work with DHEC on that. Another thing is our Defense Logistics Agency through the federal, through the feds. You know, many people saw a lot of articles about Big Blue from MUSC for hurricane preparedness. That was something that was actually requisitioned through the DLA. I think that South Carolina needs to work with neighboring states so that we can work with the federal government to brush that up. I'm
Thanks,
assuming
Jason.
shut up.
Yes, that was it. And sorry to have thrown you a curveball right from the beginning. I went right into the questions and didn't get your introduction. So we'll have the introduction after the first question. So Sam, we'll go to your answer to the first question, and then we'll go to the beginning, and then we'll go to question number 2. So same question for you, Sam. You've heard about, what have you learned about the handling of the novel coronavirus outbreak, and how would you help prepare our state for similar pandemics in the future?
Sure. So I won't totally blow the question. We'll say hi. My name is Sam Scarden. Thank you all for joining us today. I think it's extremely important that even during this extremely difficult and unusual time, we're all staying engaged and working to elect people who share our values. And so I want to thank everyone who's on the call, Joe, Jason, everyone for being involved in the process right now. So thank you all. To jump in your question, you know, this crisis is pandemic is very personal and serious to me. I lost my own grandmother to the virus last month, and something I learned about it, she was in a Medicaid nursing facility. She was the 14th casualty in that facility, including not just residents, but several members of the medical staff who were working there as well. So first of all, my thanks, my thoughts. We need to be supporting all of our frontline healthcare workers right now. So that's first and foremost. Number 2 is, you know, we're blessed and fortunate to have one of the great retirement facilities in South Carolina in our district as well, as Bishop Gadsden. My grandfather was actually an Episcopal minister who ironically helped found Bishop Gadsden, one of the nicest retirement facilities in our district. And they've had 2 cases, which were both extremely successfully isolated, quarantined. They've had no outbreak, no fatalities, and it just goes to show it's a microcosm of the disparities in care that we have in our healthcare system. Stepping back from this crisis, we have 164,000 South Carolinians who could be covered by Medicaid if we just, with one stroke of the pen, expanded Medicaid in our state. We don't have the resources to do the testing, to do the contact tracing, to stockpile the PPE that we need to be doing because we've defunded DHEC for years. So we need leaders who want to lead on healthcare issues, who want to acknowledge healthcare disparities and invest in making our state more resilient in the future. I also think there's another side to this crisis, which is the economic side. Something I work on every day is trying to make our economy more inclusive, more equitable by supporting our small local businesses. And that kind of innovative economic thinking is the kind of thing that we need to lead our state out of this economic crisis in addition to the healthcare crisis.
Great. Thanks, Sam, and I'm very sorry to hear about your grandmother. It's terrible. Jason, please introduce yourself. I'm sorry I skipped over the formalities at the beginning.
That's okay. I imagined that time was a commodity, so I wanted to just jump right in. So yes, I'm Jason Mills. I'm running for State Senate District 41. You know, I have a background of healthcare. I've been a pharmacist for 14 years. That's been a complex journey that's involved things like healthcare advocacy, amongst other things. I mentioned before, I have a background in supply chain. I'm also an up-and-coming small business owner. I've been married coming up on 15 years to my lovely wife. I have 2 kids, twins that are 10 years old. And, I really wanted to throw my name in the hat because I just wanted to make people aware that there are other ways that you can get representatives from the community. I think that I represent something a little bit more niche in that I didn't choose politics as a career. I chose a different pathway, and now I'm coming into politics with a lot of experience and runway behind me that I would like to take forward and continue public service from not only a healthcare standpoint, but from just general public service.
Right. Thank you, Jason. And Sam, your introduction as well?
Sure, yeah, I'll extend my thanks again. And my name's Sam Scardon. I'm running for Senate District 41. This is just an incredibly important election. We've already jumped into the urgency of the crisis facing us, but there's so many issues that our state Senate has direct control over. From the healthcare policy and the economic policy we've talked about to education policy, infrastructure, our resiliency to climate change, our willingness to fight back against climate change, and building an inclusive, equitable economy. Like I said, that's my day job. I work to support our small local businesses, expand access to capital to people and entrepreneurs who couldn't otherwise get it. And again, it's that outside the box, innovative entrepreneurial thinking and leadership that I hope to bring to the state Senate. I'm very proud of the campaign we've put together so far. We have endorsements from several people on this call, leaders in our local party, Senator Marlon Kimpson, my former boss, Congressman John Lewis, who's one of the great heroes of mine and heroes of civil rights and progressive values in America. So I hope I can put together a campaign that will make all the Democrats in this district proud and flip this seat and lead to really quality representation in the state Senate that shares our values.
Great. Thanks, Sam. And if you could just go right into, as state senator, what is your number one legislative priority? Definitely.
Well, we touched on recovering from this crisis, which I think is the obvious, most urgent issue facing the state. In addition to that, I'd say education. Our public schools in South Carolina are failing, and there's no other way to put it. I'm a graduate of Charleston County Public Schools. I remember growing up here and we missed days of class because the air conditioners were broken. The first thing we learned in 7th grade social studies was all the things out of date in our textbook because the textbooks we were getting were 10, 15 years old. And we're still having the same issues. We've got a moral failing in our state. We are not educating all of our kids to live up to their God-given potential. We have an economic failing. Before I did small business work in economic planning for our region, the single biggest barrier to building a sustainable, prosperous, inclusive economy here is not having a workforce talented enough to fill the jobs of the 21st century. I have a friend who sends her son to school on James Island. They have one of the best STEM labs in the state. Incredible, well-financed STEM lab. Her son in 2 years has never set foot in that lab because they haven't been able to hire a teacher qualified to teach in it. We need to recruit and retain the best teachers. We're not doing that right now. We need to have universal pre-K, so every student is starting at or above grade level in kindergarten, because when you never catch up, all the data shows that. And we need to address the disparities in our system. Our district has 33 public schools in it. Exactly half of them are rated good or excellent, and exactly half are rated poor or failing. That's the kind of disparity that is the story of education in South Carolina. And we need a state senator who is focused on, who acknowledges that as a problem, as the problem in the state, and is going to work to fix it.
Thanks very much. Jason, same question to you, state senator. What is your number one priority as a legislator?
Yeah, well, kudos to Sam. He stole my notes. But I think, education, right? It has to be. I grew up the son of an environmental engineer, and you would think I would have it force-fed into me that it's about Greenpeace and recycling and everything else. And he was really hardcore about making sure that I had a good education, I had good education opportunities. And why? Because education is the great ultimate leveling of the field. What you do, it's, I know it's cliche, but it truly is an investment. It's not an issue, it's an economic investment. And we need to treat it like that. I hate to come off as doom and gloom, but, as a father of 2 kids in the public school system, I have to pay attention to things like the Quality Accounts report that comes out of Education Week, which is information that's fed from, the Department of Education. And our state's not doing well. I think we need to talk about math, and I think we need to talk about what that means for the economy in the future. I think data literacy is one of the biggest components of our economy, and we need to be teaching our kids how to function in society, whether they go off to a higher education in college or if they want to go to a trade school, whatever. They need to understand and be literate with numbers and data. The education infrastructure, I think we need, again, that hyper focus on math. When you look at issues like S419, yeah, sure, it's taking away some of the testing, but it's also playing around with increasing in benchmarks. I really think we need to walk away from a lot of the teach to the test mentality and teach towards mastery. That's where all of the literature shows that's where you get your success. That's where children flourish. And that is how our economy is going to rebuild.
Thanks very much. And Jason, question number 3, you'll get the first shot at that.
Sure.
As anyone on James Island or West Ashley knows, flooding is still an issue in Senate District 41. What would you do about flooding?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is I'm going to pay attention to what was issued September of last year, and that's the Dutch Dialogues report. If you haven't, check it out, Dutch Dialogues, charleston.org. It's a 252-page report. Don't worry, it's a lot of pictures, but there's great graphics in there that really talk to, what Charleston learned by bringing in subject matter experts to see how we deal with water. I think it was a fantastic scientific approach. The focus was on water and Charleston's survival. We're not alone in this. There's other cities that have had to deal with water before: Amsterdam, New York City, London, Ho Chi Minh City, San Francisco. I mean, a lot of these people have put in an infrastructure to help live with water. We're not going to get rid of flooding, but there's ways to manage it. I think we would need to review a lot of our various ordinances throughout our county and our cities. If you read, for example, the Charleston County ordinances, I think it's chapter 9, talks about, having a building official, and they talk a little bit about water. I think that language needs to be bolstered significantly to talk about what are some of the studies by civil engineers, and how is water going to shed from any new construction, any new project that's going to go through. How is that going to affect the neighbors and the roads? That is what I would like to do, and that's what I would really like to promote as somebody coming in from a state Senate seat and working with that. I understand growth, but I really care more about my neighbors more, and I think there's a wise way to really work with water. And again, let's take the data that we were given and do something with it. It's just science. It's bipartisan. I don't think anybody would argue the fact that water is an issue. So that's my time.
Thank you, Jason. Sam, what would you do about flooding?
Definitely. Well, I'll pick up right there and talk about the Dutch Dialogues as well. One thing I was frustrated about, and I think a lot of people in our district might have been frustrated about, is the Dutch Dialogues only identified one hotspot in the 41st district, which runs from Johns Island, James Island, up through West Ashley, all the way up, hops the Ashley River into North Charleston and Somerville. I think what we should do is commission a similar study to identify all of the hotspots in our district, because there are dozens of them. My own street here on James Island had knee-deep water in it last month. And it's to say there's only one place in Charleston's major study of flooding and flooding infrastructure. I think we need to expand and build on that study, because I agree there's so much that we need to do to be able to live with the water, to be able to manage the water. So infrastructure is a huge component of it. Removing the bureaucracy from securing that funding, from building the infrastructure, from clearing the ditches, whether you live in the PSD or the town or the city or the county, it shouldn't matter who's responsible for clearing your ditches and your pipes. If that's what's causing the flooding, we need to get it solved immediately. So we need to fast track that kind of thing through the bureaucracy. I will take a step back though and say, in addition to better infrastructure, we need better leaders on climate change. It's not sustainable just to only ever deal with the ever rising tides and the ever rising sea levels. We need leaders who are going to prioritize clean energy, make South Carolina fossil fuel free by 2050. We operate 8 coal-fired power plants in South Carolina, and several of them are operated by Santee Cooper, which is on the block to be sold right now. Why don't we make it a condition of the sale that they pull those coal plants offline, so South Carolina can start being a leader in combating climate change? We make electric cars up in Berkeley County, but there's no electric charging infrastructure between Charleston and Columbia on I-26. We need to make the investments that make South Carolina a leader on stopping and reversing climate change if we're ever going to actually stop these sea levels from rising.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. Okay, question number 4. Sam, you'll get the first shot at this one. Everybody on this forum who lives in Senate District 41 is no stranger to traffic. I'm sure neither you nor Jason are either. It's something we all experience almost on a daily basis. What would you do about congestion?
Sure. So let's start with the bigger picture. And I agree, Joe, by the way. I sit in the traffic every day going to work. I know so many of us do too. We are a very suburban district over here. So we have to expand our options. You know, we are as we've covered, low-lying district, low-lying area filled with wetlands. We're never going to be able to pave our way entirely out of our traffic problem. When you're sitting in traffic, it's not just that you need another road alternative to drive on. You need another method that's realistically possible, whether that's getting out in pedestrian options, bike options, mass transit options. I don't think we should ever build a road in South Carolina again that doesn't have those 3 capabilities. So you do actually have a realistic option to get out of your car and to bike, walk, mass transit to wherever you need to go. Some of the most innovative projects in the state on that front are happening right now in our area. The West Ashley Pedestrian Bridge, the Low Country Rapid Transit bus system, the Low Country Low Line downtown. Those are just 3 examples of really innovative mobility projects. And they don't have a dime of state funding in them. All 3 of those projects I just listed right now are entirely locally funded and federal. I think our state, you know, to my point about us needing to be leaders on fighting climate change, we need to be leaders on innovation and infrastructure. And right now we're leaving it totally up to the cities and rural government to fund any kind of innovation in how we move around and how we solve our traffic issues. So those are some of the things I would do. And like I said, you know, we have got to, starting tomorrow, never build a road again in South Carolina that doesn't have those multimodal options.
Thank you. Jason, same question. What would you do about congestion in Senate 41?
No, I get it. I think growth is a fickle thing. You know, it's a double-edged sword. You bask in the economic benefits, and yet you suffer some of the growing pains that comes with it. I think talking mass transit, I think biking lanes, those are, I couldn't agree more with Sam's sentiments on that. And that's where, again, we need to really work with and bolster a lot of the ordinances in our county and cities to not only make that, you know, just a good socially responsible idea to do, but actually make it mandated with significant repercussions if it's not followed through. It has to be budgeted for. It has to be planned for. I think when you have developers coming in and they want to drop a 300 unit, you know, apartment complex on something, okay, I get it. People need homes and we're a growing economy, but why do they have to go there? And when they went there, what studies were done to talk with, you know, what's that going to do to traffic patterns, assuming each one of those units comes with at least 1 car? What is that going to, what kind of burden is that going to put on our mass transit system? Are we going to need new routes? Are we going to need new drivers? What are we going to do to advocate for cleaner running cars and bicycle lanes? I think all of those things we can control locally. I agree. The state needs to support us in that endeavor, not only here in Charleston, but along all the coastal cities going into the upstate. South Carolina is one of those states that just has it has a reputation, and forward thinking and social progression is not one of them, unfortunately. I know everybody that's paying attention today absolutely meets that measure, but we need to take the very engaged people that are on the phone or on their computer right now, and we need to expand that net and cast it out over the entire state so that we can all benefit from it.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, we're up to question number 5. 3 more to go, including this one. Jason, you get to go first. And this was particularly composed by the Sea Island Democrats. We've seen exponential growth in various communities that were once considered rural areas. These communities have also seen development in low-lying areas through methods such as fill and build imposed by developers. If elected, how will you address issues regarding overdevelopment in these areas, and how do you plan to protect the quality of life for residents in these communities? Jason?
Yeah, we're really hitting on a theme here. We're talking about flooding, environment, we're talking about traffic, and now we're talking about fill and build. All of these are interrelated. We need better infrastructure to support our local officials to absolutely say, no, you can't do that, developers, you don't have enough studies, or the studies that you've done suggest that you're gonna have water flow going into our suburbs and into our roadways. But I think one of the other a step back question is, why are we seeing so much fill and build? And I think it's because obviously our coastal region has experienced good economic growth. There's a really good chance that you're going to be able to take advantage of an opportunity of land that you potentially shouldn't be able to build on in the first place. There's good schools. We got great people. That's fine. But I also think that we need to partner with some of our friends further into the upstate. I think, engaging folks like Senator Matthews and Senator Hutto and talking about what potential growth opportunities can we see that are not going to cause inundation of flooding and overfilling and traffic and destroying a lot of the natural aesthetic that we have in District 41, just so that we can cram 300 new people into a place that will be, 20 minutes away by car to their job. I think we need to look a little bit further into the upstate, partnering with our friends out, up in Ridgeville area, and see what we can do along the I-26 corridor, and really look for opportunities to expand the Charleston footprint, the Charleston economy. Just because you live in Charleston doesn't mean you have to drive down to the Charleston Peninsula to go to work. I think we really need to work further into the upstate for some of those growth opportunities.
Thank you. Sam, same question. We've seen exponential growth in various communities that were once considered rural areas. These communities have also seen development in low-lying areas through methods such as fill and build imposed by developers. If elected, how will you address issues regarding overdevelopment in these areas, and how do you plan to protect quality of life for residents in these communities?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think we have to change our development patterns, and I'm glad this was the next question, because actually in the traffic question, I meant to bring this up as well. In the Low Country, we've had a bias for sprawl for way too long. We've just made it cheaper and easier to sprawl to be our economic development. I think we need to change that. We need to incentivize changing that. We need to have policies and regulations that have teeth to them, that incentivize infill development. So we're reusing land that's already been developed, so that we're creating areas where people can live, work, and play without having to get in a car to go 20, 30 miles to get to work. Because I think, my background is business economics, economic planning, and community development lending. I can tell you there's no such thing as totally stopping development. I know that's a popular concept to peddle sometimes. Economies are either growing or shrinking, and I assure you, you don't want to be a shrinking economy. I fear that we might all find the consequences of that soon as a result of this pandemic. So if we're going to grow, we got to figure out how to grow responsibly, how to grow sustainably. And that's why, like I said, we have to have a bias towards infill. We have to have a bias towards solutions that don't add to our traffic problem, that use land that's already ripe and has been developed rather than new land. It's good for traffic. It's good for flooding. It's good for the environment. Every time you reduce sprawl and you are smarter about how you develop, that's less green space, less wetlands you're destroying. And so, yeah, I believe our state should incentivize it. Our municipalities should. And if developers don't follow those rules, I think there should be serious consequences for it.
Thank you. Sam, you go first on this question, and this was composed by the West Ashley Democrats. Every year, we see a battle in the State House to take away the full range of reproductive health care from South Carolinians. Will you support full access to reproductive health care and vote against any legislation that would restrict reproductive freedom?
Yes, I will vote against any of the legislation. I'm so glad that question came up. I'm sorry we've made it this far into the forum without talking about this, but I watched for the previous hour the House 115 forum that was on the Zoom line before this. You know, I'm so glad that this House district where I live is going to be represented by a strong Democratic woman. I thought it was great for our party that we had such strong women Democratic leaders on that call and in that debate. I have a bias for the moderator as well, but that was my wife Leslie too. So yeah, I mean, I think we need people who stand up for women's issues in the state Senate and in the state House. I think that's one of the most important things about this election. We're running against an incumbent who, on the most important reproductive choice issue, on the most important women's health and women's rights issue of this legislative session, didn't show up. There was a heartbeat abortion ban coming before a committee, and our incumbent, our current state senator, didn't show up for it. And I think that just goes to show why it's so important that we flip this seat, because we need representatives in the state House and the state Senate that will show up and stand up for women's health and women's rights and reproductive freedom. And I'll go back to that's why it's so important that we nominate a strong, serious contender who's ready to carry that message into the fall and win this seat, because we can't afford to keep having representatives who duck this issue and don't show up to fight for it.
Thank you. Jason, same question. Every year we see a battle in the State House to take away the full range of reproductive health care in South Carolinians. Will you support full access to reproductive health care and vote against any legislation that would restrict reproductive freedom?
Oh, absolutely. I will go blue in the face on this particular topic. You know, again, as a healthcare provider, I feel this issue is particularly close to my heart. I have counseled patients. I have worked with physicians, and there is nothing more sacrosanct than that agreement that is going on there. Any decisions that come from that with regards to women's health, that is between her and her provider. No one else should be in between that. And also, I want to also speak for the providers as well. The decision to go to something like an abortion, that is not something that is just waded into casually. That is something that is critically thought out. If it is a last, it's one of the last things that want to be explored before it actually happens. And personally, I found it to be an immense waste of time that actually went through last year. Same comments about Senator Sen. I thought it was a major cop-out for her to not show up because that way she could still say, well, I had nothing to do with that vote because I wasn't there. Well, guess what? You're a woman. Women were looking to you to stand up for them, and you didn't show up. In addition, as the father of a daughter, I don't want any legislator telling my daughter anything about what she should do with her body and what choices that she's going to make in the future. I'm hoping as a dad, I can work with her so she's armed with the good tools to make the right decisions. But as far as what her relationship is with her providers, that is between them. There is no legislation that should step in between those two.
Thank you, Jason. And our last question. Jason, you're going to answer first for this one. Why are you the best candidate to take on a Republican incumbent this fall?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, what I see as a Democrat is a lot of campaigns come through and we tout things like change and that we have to flip this and do that. And yet I feel like a lot of times we end up propping up candidates who are coming from, they're using the same tricks, they're coming from the same channels, and we're measuring by the same methods. And yet we've had a trifecta, Republican trifecta in our area since 2003. I feel like I could be something different in that I'm coming from a background of science, somebody that didn't get shepherded through a process that would ultimately end up with a high probability of being a politician. But I do like to meet people. I do like to talk. I like to help people. I've been a healthcare provider working in public service for the last 14 years for our community. I enjoy this work. We need real change. One of the things that I would look at, and I'm not comparing myself to him, but you have to ask, why was Representative Cunningham successful? You're talking about an engineer who became an attorney, who had real world experience, and he was able to take that forward, and look where we are today. We're now celebrating with a congressman who has a fantastic track record of working across the aisle, being successful, being viewed as a leader. And why? It's because he has a background of experience, and he knows how to view objective data, and he knows how to work with that data, and he knows how to work with people. And that's something that I've been working on for the last 14 years. Happy to continue to do it. Would like to do it for my district and for my community.
Thank you, Jason. And Sam, same question to finish up. Why are you the person who is going to be the Republican incumbent this fall?
Yeah, well, let's first of all talk about the opportunity, Joe, because first of all, this is a rare opportunity where we can beat a Republican incumbent. We've got a district that voted heavily for Congressman Cunningham, voted for James Smith for governor. Donald Trump did not get a majority here. This isn't a pie in the sky, maybe we can win. This is we can win this seat. It's voting Democratic for other offices. It's time for someone who shares our values and can bring that leadership to the state Senate too. So it's an incredibly rare and unique opportunity, and it go back to that's why we've put together such a serious campaign. We're running against a Republican incumbent who's taken 2/3 of their campaign contributions from PACs and corporations. We worked very hard to put together a network of dozens of volunteers, hundreds of donors, talked to thousands of voters in person before this crisis and over the phone since. That's the kind of movement, the kind of grassroots support we're going to need to actually beat such an entrenched, well-funded Republican, especially one who's got so much special interest money behind them. So that's the campaign we're trying to put forward. Campaign I think will win in November. And I'll add that I think it's important that we take this opportunity and elect someone who shares our democratic values. I do have a background. I was one of the first low country field organizers for Barack Obama's campaign. I 19 years old, knocking doors for him and doing data entry in his office down on President Street in 2007. And then I went to work for Congressman John Lewis before I got a business degree, the great civil rights hero. I think if our state was run and if our state legislature had more people who would work to put Barack Obama in the White House, more people would learn leadership from Congressman John Lewis, our state would look a lot different. So that we elect more people who have that background, have those deep-rooted democratic and progressive histories, and putting together a serious, substantial campaign to win this seat. It's not going to be a cakewalk in November.
Thank you to both candidates, and thanks for putting up with my snafu at the beginning of the questioning. I appreciate it very much. We're entering into our last section now, where each candidate gets 5 minutes to speak on whatever they want to speak on. Sam, you were answered second with the last question, so you get to go first with this last 5 minute section.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, first of all, to thank everyone for sticking with us. I'm always impressed on a call like this when the number of participants does not go down. So I appreciate everyone on this call's dedication and commitment to being part of this process. I think it's very important, and I thank you for it. I'll go back to the important issues on the ballot here. We can talk till the cows come home about ourselves and our campaigns. At the end of the day, public education is on the ballot in this race. Our state Senate is where funding for public education happens. It's policy is set for our state. It's where DHEC gets funded. It's where we can make our state a leader in fighting climate change and where we can build economic opportunity. So as important as it is to have the right background, which I would submit that my background I'm very proud of, having that balance of policy experience with President Obama and Mr. Lewis, combine it with business experience, doing economic planning for our region and small business lending. I think those two things are a great balance of skills that could lead to high quality representation in the state Senate leads to a unique background for our state. And like I said, having a few more people in leadership in Columbia with those strong roots and progressive values and pragmatic business experience, I don't think that's such a bad thing. So those are the important issues on the ballot. And I'll leave you with a story from my old boss, Congressman John Lewis. I think when we talk about these big issues, and having lived in South Carolina almost my whole life, it's easy to get frustrated and say, this is just, no more big talk about impossible issues. So this is South Carolina, it's deeper, things are never going to change. That's just not true. I worked for Congressman Lewis, and he always kept a jar of jelly beans in his office. I always was really curious about it. It was on a top shelf of a bookshelf, so you couldn't even reach in it to grab some jelly beans out if you wanted to. And one day I asked him, Congressman, why do you keep that jar of jelly beans? This is in the U.S. Capitol. And he said, it's a reminder of how far we've come. Because when he was born in 1940 in rural Alabama, the literacy test that prevented his parents from registering to vote, so-called literacy test, was you had to count the number of jelly beans in a jar. I don't know a more impossible problem to solve than that. Congressman Lewis in his lifetime marched for voting rights. And then he was elected to the U.S. Congress, where I worked on his staff, like I said. If he could turn that jar of jelly beans from a symbol of oppression and hate and voter suppression, if he could, in his lifetime, turn that jar of jelly beans into a story of inspiration and a story of how far we've come, I think we can make South Carolina a national leader in public education. I think we can make ourselves the state that leads the fight against climate change and has one of the most inclusive and equitable economies in America. So that's the long-term vision. That's what motivates me. That's what inspires me to think that this election does matter, and we can make a lot of progress on these issues. So thank you again to everyone for joining us. Thank you, Joe, for moderating this. And I ask for three things. We need your votes in the Democratic primary on June 9th or beforehand by absentee if you choose to vote that way. We would love your volunteerism. It is hard to reach people right now in this pandemic, so we need people to help us make phone calls, to talk to their friends and neighbors, their families. And we need dollars. Like I said, we have a Republican incumbent who's taken on 2/3 of her financing from PACs and special interests. So we need dollars, we need volunteers, and most importantly, we need your vote on June 9th. You can do all of that at samsgarden.com. Thank you all again, and I'm honored to have the support of so many of you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Sam. Jason, your closing remarks?
So I'm the guy that's keeping everybody away from their dinner and television. So yes, I just want to echo a lot of those same sentiments. Thanks to everybody who's taken the time out of their busy schedules and their evenings. I know it can be challenging, so very much. Thank you very, very much. At the end of the day, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a businessman, I'm a healthcare professional. My approach to problem solvings and issues is it's a very metered approach. I take empiric data. I have methodologies to measure it. I know who to contact when there are issues that I don't fully understand. One of the critical components about my experience is deferring to expertise. And part of that is making sure that you're deferring to the right people. If it comes to issues that have to deal with, environmental change, for example, yes, I'm good with a lot of that literature, but I am not an environmental engineer. I would like to partner with people who can speak to a lot of those issues, and I can help liaise a lot of that information and partner with other people, whether they're senators, whether there are community members. That's what I'm good at. Another component of my background is working in a diverse setting. I love diversity in the workplace. I get to work, I have the privilege of working every day with an extremely diverse group of people from all different communities, different credos, different viewpoints on life, different politics, which can sometimes be challenging. But what you get from that is you get all those fantastic experiences and all those different opinions. And you know what you can do with that is you can actually create change. And one of the things that I would love the opportunity to do is bring a sense of that to our state house, whether it's making sure that we have teachers, actual two-day teachers involved and participating in the EOC, whether it's making sure that appointments that are happening at the state level are going to people that are the most qualified, and not because of who they know. That's the background that I have. That's what I would like to share with my community, because again, I feel like South Carolina has a fantastic road in front of it. Sometimes I can be a cockeyed optimist, but you know what? That's what you get with me. If you want to learn more about me, please, please, please check me out, mills4scsenate.com, or ask me questions, engage me on Twitter, Facebook. You know, we're coming right up on June 9th. Just please consider, you know, what it is you want at the ballot box. I would ask everybody right now who's participating tonight to challenge your presumptions, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Reach out to me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much, Joe.
Thank you, Jason. And thank you, Sam, as well. Very much appreciate both candidates taking the time to really give us these thoughtful answers on so many questions that are important to Senate District 41. I'm sure I speak for the Sea Island Democrats and the James Island Folly Beach Democrats, as well as the West Ashley Democrats when I say thanks for doing this. That's going to conclude our program for this evening. So everybody who came, thanks for coming. As the candidates know, they're speaking to the Democratic leaders in this district. So everyone who is here on this forum, thanks for coming, and please help get out the vote. Do your part to flip state Senate seat 41.